Brilliant. Okay, guys, so good afternoon, and you're very welcome to this fourth webinar session of our Industry Insight series, where today, along with some industry experts, we'll be looking at the health and life science sector in Northern Ireland. So this series of events is designed to help you think about different ways and places that you could use your degree. My name's Claudine, because I know I probably haven't met most of you before, and I work in Careers, Employability Skills at Queen's. I'll be your host for this webinar, which should last probably about an hour, and I'm going to keep it high level and hopefully interactive, so please do post questions or comments in the chat throughout the duration. We'll ensure to get them picked up at the appropriate time. And please remember, and I can see you all know this anyway, it's been the drill for the last year, but keep the cameras off and on mute, particularly as I know there's some actual classes joining, so we don't want that background noise. So guys, you'll all be studying different things and at different stages of your study, and indeed different stages of your thinking about your future. But obviously, due to the fact that you're here, you're all motivated by starting to think about, well, where could you work? How could you apply your interest to a fulfilling career? What industries are growing, and what are some of the market trends? So we're delighted to welcome industry professionals to these events to present in an informal way factors influencing the working world for graduates in 2021 and beyond. And today, as we know, we're going to be focusing on health and life sciences. Just pushing those slides on a wee bit. Obviously, this is a huge industry area, so we're not going to cover all bases today, but we will run this event in the same format, but with a different angle again. So keep your eye on the comms and on my future. So what's happening this afternoon? Well, delighted, as I said, we'll be joined by 4 different employers, each with their own expert and unique view of and experience in the sector to offer insight into our topic today. So first up, delighted to welcome Dr. Rob Gundy. So hi again, Rob. Rob is a scientist, a business leader and founder and director of Anglesark. Am I pronouncing that right, Rob?
Well, yep.
Happy days. And after hearing from Rob, you'll have the opportunity to hear from 3 individuals working and leading in the sector. So from Almac, from Seagate and from Exploristics, who will join us in a panel discussion. So the objectives of this session, and I think it's always useful to kind of look at this now, because as we're going through the discussion, you can refer back to them and then hopefully try and get some tangible outcomes for yourself. But it's to understand more contextually about the current working world dynamics in Northern Ireland. To start to understand how a variety of industries are actually interested in students from a wide variety of degree subjects that perhaps you hadn't thought of before. And also to start to think about your own options and diverse areas of work that you could currently enter. So Rob, as the world around us continues to change at a really fast speed from a wide variety of perspectives, so do organisations and individuals need to continue to adapt and evolve in response to this. So it's really important, we believe, for graduates to understand the external market and the many ways they might be able to place themselves in that market. So delighted to have you along today to perhaps spend the next 15 or so minutes introducing yourself and your background, and then perhaps helping the audience understand a little bit more about the broader sector. So, you know, what are some of the key trends, opportunities and challenges? What sort of roles perhaps are existing in the sector and how might that be changing? So a big call for 15 minutes. But you know, it's not about answers. You know, it's about pushing some of those questions and some of those thoughts out there. So yeah, without further ado, over to you, and I'll stop sharing my screen here.
Well, thanks Claudine, and I think this is really a really important kind of opportunity to reflect on the environment, the employment environment post graduation, and understand, you know, what the opportunities might be and how you might avail of them, because I think with every year that passes, the opportunities change and become more numerous, but require adaptability. And you'll hear about my career now, and you'll understand that it's nothing if not a story of adaptation, adapting to conditions and being creative. So I'll start from the beginning. So my first degree at Liverpool University was in pharmacology, and I really enjoyed that. At the end of that, I got a 2-1, which was exactly what I kind of thought I would do, which was good. Wasn't quite sure what to do, but I knew that my imagination had been really captured by neuroscience, neuropharmacology, excitotoxicity in particular. So I pursued a PhD with Professor Dame Nancy Rothwell in Manchester University on stroke and the immune system within the brain. And that was an incredible experience with an incredible mentor who said to me, you know, what do you want to do with this PhD? Where do you want to go? And I had a really strong sense of the commercial side of things, wanting to go into industry, because I felt that would be the quickest way to get impact in patients. So I was, you know, a medical researcher, was doing a PhD because I wanted to save people's lives. And I felt that being in industry was the quickest way to do that. Okay, so very kindly, my supervisor, because she was a good one, I provided a number of options within industry for me to progress my career, and I chose to do that with a pharmaceutical company called Schering-Plough, which is now part of the Merck group in Italy. They had a research center, and I took a postdoc position there, looking at stroke and how the cannabinoid system works with stroke. And that was 2.5 years of research in an industrial context, but basic research trying to develop early stage drugs for Schering-Plough. At this point, a very linear career progression as I moved to GSK to do a similar, slightly more senior job back in the UK, heading up a small team of in vivo scientists working on stroke, Alzheimer's disease, Parkinson's disease, between Harlow and Stevenage. Again, as a straight bench scientist, trying to discover early drug discovery and development. Now, at this point, I start to get seduced by the business of pharmaceuticals. So, you know, how do we progress a drug? Where do we get the innovation from? Who else is there? Who's competing with us? All that kind of thing that isn't necessarily science, practical science, but is the application of that science, and why does it matter, and how do we make a business out of it? So I started to work with the due diligence teams who were going in to look at external companies. Should we buy this company? Should we buy this asset? And that was really, really exciting. So I knew then that I wanted to move away from the bench and become more of a strategic scientist looking at the business side of things. At that point, a company I was outsourcing some of my practical work for in Finland approached me and said, we want to become a proper pharmaceutical company. We want to find assets and build a portfolio. Will you come and join us as Chief Scientific Officer and help us grow a biotech company in neuroscience in Finland? So I did that, and I moved to that company as Chief Scientific Officer. We started to build a portfolio, allowed me to have a look at academic research, have a look at early stage innovation, and license that, do deals to bring it into our small company based on the fact that we would share some of the value as we develop that drug, and then out-licensed it to larger companies. So I was with that company for about 18 months, and then we ran into the financial crash of 2007, 2008, and the VC money that was keeping us going kind of dried up a little bit because things were very tough financially. And at that point, I started to look at other options. This is where my Northern Irish story begins, because then I was approached by Almac, more of which you'll hear later from Frances, who you'll enjoy listening to because she's brilliant. And Almac approached me and said, we want to start a biotech company in oncology, and we need someone to look after the business side of things. Do you want to move over to Northern Ireland and help us start this company? And at that point where the financial markets were very flat, the opportunity to work with Alan McClay, who had started and turned Almac into a very profitable business, wanted to put his money into building a biotech from scratch in oncology in Northern Ireland. And so I jumped at the chance, came over here in 2008, and for 7 years helped build that business in Craigavon, as well as helping build businesses around technology that Almac had through IP in drug discovery and drug delivery, and work with a great bunch of people to help build a biotech company, acquire assets from outside. So look at the environment, who's doing what, who can we partner with, where is the good science, can we bring that into Almac, can we develop collaborations across academia with Queen's and other universities, can we build those relationships? And that's really satisfying because it allows you to develop a really wide network across the globe, understand where the good science is, understand how to acquire that science, understand how to sell that science on to bigger companies, understand what they want. It's all about human reaction and interaction, understanding how I develop a network of professionals within biotech and pharmaceuticals so that I can find technology, we can develop it in Almac, and I can sell it on. There's business in here as well, so it's combining scientific rigor and diligence together with knowing the process of developing a drug, together with being able to shape a deal, a financial deal that sells that drug discovery asset onto a bigger company and makes money for Almac. And that's what I did for 7 years. At 7 years, I decided that I'd done a lot of that and I wanted to go out on my own and be more entrepreneurial. Now, at the same time, I began to advise Northern Irish government on science and technology policy. So I was lucky enough to be asked to join Matrix, which is Northern Ireland Science and Technology Expert Panel, and advises the Department for the Economy here in Northern Ireland on how they should create an environment through policy to allow science and technology companies to flourish. So I stepped out of Almac, created my own consultancy in order to advise companies and get involved in companies to grow and flourish and raise money and develop their businesses. And at the same time, I started to advise government. So for 7 or 8 years now, I've done both those things. The government thing, the government role has developed significantly. I'm now one of the main advisors for science and technology in Northern Ireland for government, and I interact with chief scientists across UK government to shape policy for the UK and Northern Ireland. In the last 7 years, I've variously raised money for companies. I've been the CEO of a couple of companies, a couple of Queen spin-outs, and more mature companies in the consumer diagnostics space. It's allowed me to come in and come out of companies. Very flexible situation as an independent consultant, but it's essentially cashing in all that experience of being a scientist, being a business development professional, converting all that experience into something that's more flexible and allows me to be more entrepreneurial, have different types of interests in companies. Over the last year, I've also become involved in an investment vehicle based in Miami, in Florida, that is currently trying to raise $250 million to invest in early stage companies. So coming full circle, I'm now trying to raise a fund to become an investor in young companies to help bring them through, leveraging the experience I've had over 3 years to help them become successful companies by raising money. Now, that's an entirely different endeavor. Asking people for $250 million to invest in things that you will find is a really tough ask, but it's really interesting, and it allows you to articulate a vision to people from Japan to California in terms of what you think you can do to help them impact human health, build businesses, and back young entrepreneurs. So that's kind of this end of my career that's gone from being a bench scientist through to being a commercial professional within a number of different companies, trying to monetize science, through to being an advisor to government, to companies, and to academia as well. And I get to spend time talking to students as an honorary lecturer at Queen's, and I've held that position at King's College London as well. So there's a lot in there, and it's been a fairly circuitous path. But I suppose the bottom line is be brave, do what interests you. That will change across your career. But understanding how business works and how your skills can be of value to private companies is really important in that. And the more you're exposed to small and large and medium-sized companies and understand how people make money out of life sciences, because ultimately, if you can't make money out of it, the patient doesn't benefit. That's the most important thing, but you've got to understand what happens in between. It's understanding how you make money out of the skills you have and what people need to drive the businesses. And if you can couple your experience and your training with that knowledge through your network and through your experience in the private sector, you should be able to adapt to whatever the environment requires of you as an individual and as an employee. So I'll finish there, Claudine, and hopefully that we can answer a few questions, but hopefully that's helpful.
Yeah, super. Thank you very much, Rob. And I think, what's probably really interesting for the audience then is, you're talking about do what interests you, but that's not necessarily linear, and that will change at different points of your career. And I think you've accurately shown that, from science to finance to commerce, networking, business development, academia, entrepreneur, different facets of your career comes in, yet you've got a very technical background with your PhD. Guys, if you don't feel that comfortable yet asking questions, perhaps even put a comment into the chat, and then we can have a discussion around that comment. But in the meantime, Rob, I think I'll just ask, if you think back to where these guys are now, which is mostly undergrad, but not predominantly, and certainly not gone out into industry yet, when you were at that point, did you have a vision of this sort of pathway that your career was going to take, or have you any advice, I suppose, apart from, I know we've got that big picture, be brave piece, but anything else behind that maybe?
Yeah, no, to be honest, when I was in my undergrad, I didn't really know. Okay, but it was when I started doing my PhD, I realised that I didn't want to be an academic. But I did want to have maximum impact with my science, and so I realised then, a year after graduating, that it was the private sector that held my interest, and that's important, because what I would say is, maybe you have an ultimate ambition to be the CEO of a company or to do something really high impact, but you have to have a foundation, right? And that foundation for me was working in big pharma. I worked for large companies for 7 or so years, GSK and Schering-Plough, and I knew I didn't want to do that ultimately, because you get lost in a big machine, and don't get me wrong, there's some really valuable positions within those companies, and they all present kind of really compelling employment propositions. But what I would say is, understand that you need to lay a foundation professionally in order to pursue what you want to do ultimately. And for me, those 7 years in big pharma helped me learn the process of drug discovery, the business of drug discovery, the component parts of it, so that I could start to do things that were slightly less obvious later with that background. So see your first part of your career as a foundation to be built upon. Now, that's particularly important in life and health sciences, because it's such a highly regulated, conservative industry, that you kind of need to know what's going on, and you can't really shortcut that. It's different if you're in tech. I think you can build an app as a 19-year-old if you have the right kind of experience and skill sets around you, but you can't really develop drugs or impact human health without that foundation. But don't see it as cast in stone your career is going to be. If you take a job with GSK or AstraZeneca, it doesn't mean to say that you're going to retire there. Like, that doesn't happen anymore. But it will provide you with invaluable experience to start that career.
Thank you. And do you see, in terms of where we are now in 2021 within the sector you're working in, do you see any sort of shifts or changes in terms of the opportunities or the challenges within the sector in the last couple of years?
I do, very much so. I think, increasingly understanding how the world of work works. So you can't just come, if you get a chance to intercalate or any experience in industry while you're doing your degree or your PhD, do that, because it makes you so much more employable and gives you a better idea of what's out there for a start. Okay. Also, what I would say is the borders between being a particular kind of scientist are very, very blurry these days, right? So when I did my, I graduated in 1996 and I was a pharmacologist. That's all I was, right? But I think graduating as a pharmacologist in 2021 requires an appreciation of how data works, of how digital technologies interface with your understanding of how a drug works, or how the body works, or how from a molecular level things work. How does the data you're producing impact on that? And what are the technologies that allow you to take advantage of that? A bigger picture is needed, I think, now, because disciplines are so much more integrated now than they were 20 or 30 years ago. I think that's changed incredibly. You didn't have startups as well. When I first started my career, it was never an option to go into a startup. And so, without wanting to contradict what I've just said about the importance of creating a foundation with a bigger company, there are more opportunities to join startups these days, and that could be a compelling proposition. But actually, you get very close to running a business very quickly if you join a startup, because it's very hand to mouth. Even if you're a startup and you just raised £5 million to do your thing, £5 million isn't a lot of money, and the CEO of that company will be working frantically to understand how best to apportion that money. And if you're working there, you'll see that happening. If you're a startup company with 5 people in, then you'll know what the CEO's up to, and you'll learn from it very quickly. So that's an opportunity that didn't exist when I was at this stage, that needs to be appreciated. And in Northern Ireland, the startup scene is burgeoning. There's more money coming in than there ever has been. There are more entrepreneurs with the motivation to do things independently than there ever has been. It's a really fertile environment.
Yeah, and I think, you're right, maybe 15, 20 years ago, then there would have been a little bit more fear about joining a startup, because you did think of your career in a linear way, are you there for the next 20 years? But actually, it's so changeable, and there's so many opportunities. It's about just taking that leap for a couple of years and getting that broad experience. We've just got a note here from someone saying, I'm a bioinformatics MSc student, and also wanted to enter big pharma as my first role. So I guess, any hints and tips around that, Rob? But yeah, there's lots of opportunities, what you're saying, basically.
Yeah, bioinformaticists, really, really employable at the moment. Lots of options here. So Francis, Almac need bioinformaticians. Diaceutics, another really great company that are very heavily data orientated. That need that kind of skill set as well. Really valuable. The key to that is understanding where the maximum impact is. How does my ability to organize and appreciate and analyze data coming out of a biological system, where's that going to have its most impact? And it's that knowledge of the context that's really important, coming with a skill set like that, I think.
Brilliant, thank you. Another note here, studying biological sciences in your last year of study. So nice to meet you all. And the process of applying for placement year. So yeah, that's from Victoria Irwin. Placements, as Rob has said, hugely important, right? Any sort of experience you can get outside academia before you sort of move into that first role can only be very helpful.
It is, and I'll tell you why, Claudine. It's something that I think you've been in the world of work for a while, you take for granted. But the ability to organise yourself, the ability to appreciate that your job is part of a process, and you have to do certain things in certain ways to fit in with the next person who's going to do the next thing in a certain way. Okay. Now it seems intuitive to say that, but when you've been a student, it doesn't work like that. You're very self-orientated, okay? You just need to complete your degree, and you complete your coursework, and you study for your exams and all the rest of it, and that's fine to get you to the hurdle that is getting your degree, right? The world of work is very different, okay? It requires appreciating what everybody else is up to, fitting in with that, and being able to, again, just basic stuff, organize, understand what is my objective here, right? My role requires me to do this, right? That's the most important thing. How I get there is up to me and my creativity and my skills, but I need to complete that thing, right? And that thing allows the next person to do that thing, right? And that's what work is all about, and that's how it differs from coming out of a degree type situation. It sounds intuitive, but that's what the experience in work allows you to bring to your next employer.
Yeah, and I think even things that perhaps maybe, you know, some of these guys haven't thought of when they're really heavily science focused is, you know, how you influence people in those environments. And it's even looking at managerial skills as well, isn't it? And working with diverse groups of people with sometimes slightly conflicting objectives. So yeah, there's a lot in it, and it's really, really exciting. Great advice and insight from Rob. I'm studying medical physics, so that's interesting as well. So we're kind of marring some of those kind of skill sets that you're talking about.
Yeah, medical physics, super interesting area. I mean, so as an investor, one of the areas I'm really interested in is radiopharmaceuticals. So the combination of a drug with a radioisotope to kind of not only hit a biological mechanism, but employ physics to kind of destroy cancer cells, for instance. And there's a lot of science in there, and you have to unpick a lot of component parts there. You have to understand how different, especially when you put that into what does that mean for manufacturing, things like that. Really complicated, but the human impact there is so great because you're combining two very difficult things, two very different things, to improve human health. So really exciting area, a lot to understand there. So a lot of work available in the future to figure all that out, I think.
A lot. So I think we're just bang on time for you, Rob, and I know you've got a super busy diary, so really genuinely appreciate you coming in and giving some of those big picture insights to the student. So I had a last question for you, which was really sort of, you know, what's the last kind of nugget of advice to give to the students? But to be honest, I think there's so much in there already to unpick. You know, so it really is that idea of getting whatever sort of industry experience, be it a short-term placement, you know, an internship, and starting to really think about that big picture and how you use your technical skills in a broader way. And I think sharing your journey where you've really, really done that in a casebook way, I'm sure will be really interesting food for thought. But I don't know if you've got a couple of final words then, just to kind of conclude.
Well, just, you know, if you're looking to
Be brave.
Want to do in the future, to just understand what you really like doing. What is it in your degree that's really excited you, and pursue that. It's what I did as becoming a neuroscientist. I just, you know, did what I really interested me, and that will lead to, you know, if you're interested in that, you will lead to something that's really fulfilling down the road for sure. That's
a great way to end, and I'll go back to a point you made a few minutes ago. It's do what interests you, but remember that will change, and the pathway's not linear. So the world's your oyster, really. So
absolutely.
Rob, thank you so much. Much appreciated, and we'll talk to you soon. All the best.
Okay, my pleasure, Claudine. Take care. Thanks, guys, everybody. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye. Okay, folks, so a lot of really interesting things in that, and we're now going to move on to the second half of our session, which is really going to develop in some of those thoughts. Our panel discussion. So huge thanks to our guest speakers for giving up their time this afternoon. I'm delighted to welcome today Francis Weldon from Almac. Do you want to turn your camera on, Francis? Hi.
Hi, everyone.
Or Jerry Kindlin from Seagate Technologies. Hi, Jerry. And Dr. Sheila McCartan from Exploristics. So hi, Sheila. Do you want to put your camera on? I saw her out there, so she'll probably coming on in a moment. So guys, you know, I'd like to ask the three of you to briefly introduce yourselves before we get started. Obviously, I've got your bios and I can do that, but I think it's much better when you do that yourself and give that sort of personal view. After we've had to hear just a couple of minutes about you and your organisation, then I know we're going to hear from you for a few minutes more around some of those kind of big nugget questions. Perhaps a little bit about your organisation, who it recruits and why, and then we'll get into some more of the thoughts that Rob was looking into around, you know, some non-linear pathways and how students can start to use their degrees in different ways. Certainly, you know, work in the career service, we do hear a lot of, you know, what Rob has said, and you're probably going to talk about that as well. And that's that those technical skills are, of course, very, very necessary. But you need other things outside of that, and how the students can really start to think how to piece those things together. So without further ado, as I said, thank you. And Francis, we'll maybe hear from you first, if that's okay.
Okay, so good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining us, and thanks to Claudine for the invitation. So I'm Frances Weldon. I'm STEM Outreach Manager at Almac Group. And Almac Group, as you're probably aware, is a global contract development and manufacturing organisation providing a whole range of integrated services across the drug development life cycle to pharma and biotech companies around the world. So the work we're involved in ranges anything from R&D to the manufacture of active pharmaceutical ingredient and drug product for preclinical, clinical and commercial use, the development, biomarker discovery, development and commercialization, supporting clinical trials, whether that be through clinical trial supply or developing software solutions to help the running of clinical trials, as well as commercial manufacture and launch of approved medicines. So my background is that I have a scientific background, a degree in analytical science, followed by a PhD from Dublin City University. And I then took up an academic post. I was kind of thinking about that track for me, but I left academia. I think that's an interesting fact about me. I took the unusual move of moving from academia to industry. And I moved to Almac in 2001, where I worked then for 13 years in the analytical development team. I left Almac in 2013, moved to Queen's to work in Business Alliance in research and enterprise, and then came back to my role, which is in the marketing team in Almac, as STEM Outreach Manager. So I suppose my path's taken my career to different places, but what I've always stuck true to is something, as I think Rob had mentioned, that inspired me, that interested me, that motivated me, and I feel that my job makes a difference every day that I've worked. I've been doing something that I find fulfilling and worthwhile. So that's basically me. Thank you.
Lovely, thanks, Frances. And Jerry?
Hi, I'm Jerry Kennan. I work for a company called Seagate Technology, who are one of the world's leaders in data storage. We're the biggest hard drive manufacturer in the world, with a market cap of about 20 billion and about 40,000 people worldwide. Probably our most high-tech plant is in Derry, where we have 1,500 people in a wafer fabrication site, highly technical, with over about somewhere between 600 to 800 engineers, many of whom working from home, which is important. And we both develop and manufacture heads. I think unique about disk drives is that we've witnessed an incredible change just by looking at our customers, as the world has moved from sort of desktop computing to client, then to the cloud, and now it moves to the edge. And that really is our customers. We went from Dell to Google to Microsoft, and now we're going to edge customers. So huge change. I am a qualified engineer a long time ago, and I've spent most of my life either managing in logistics, operation, or technical groups. I've always stayed in Ireland, although I've managed for many years global groups from this part of the world. But I'm bringing, as of the last 2 years, I'm head of government relations, which brings non-linear almost to its nth degree. I'm working in a department that traditionally would be the domain of lawyers, ex-diplomats, government officials. But because the world's changing, the data sphere is changing so much, the companies like ours need people who understand the technology and how things are made the way we are, and to provide that impact into things like data security, data privacy, even just all government policy, Brexit, recovery and resilience, post-COVID stuff. So I am an example. I'm not trained to do it, but just experiences of different roles, different companies over the years, and from trade associations, president of the Chamber of Commerce, that got me to where I am today. Okay.
Sorry, Claudine, you're on mute.
You're on mute there.
Thank you. Sheila, I think we've lost. I was just trying to get in contact with her. She was online and we've lost her. So I'm sure she'll join us in a little while. So again, if we can have a couple of more minutes. So thank you for that.
I can see Sheila.
Oh, Sheila?
Yeah, hello.
Are you there? Oh, great. Hello, how are you? Sheila, do you want to turn your camera on? I saw you were offline there, so that's great you're back. Do you want to just turn your camera on?
have it on according to mine, but perhaps it's misbehaving. Can you see me now?
Perfect. Hello. Yes. How are you?
According to my setup, I was all good, but sure, just goes to show you.
That's no problem. We're just doing a brief introduction, Sheila, and then we'll hear from each of the three of you for little insights. So,
grand. So I work for Exploristics, and what Exploristics do is we have biostatistical service, and also we have biosimulation software, and we provide support for anybody that's running clinical trials. And within the company, you have a services team that would do kind of like the straightforward kind of analysis of any clinical trial outputs and support in general for clinical trials. But we also have the strategic consulting team, which is kind of nearly like we will kind of handle any unusual questions or queries or difficulties that somebody setting up a clinical trial may have. So they would look into saying, well, what's going to be the best way to run this clinical trial in terms of cost, in terms of timelines and things like that. And we also have marketing and business development as well. Like Francis and Jerry, my career pathway, well, is all over the show. I'm not saying that yours is all over the show, but mine certainly is. And I had started off in a degree of molecular biology and then went away off and did a master's in science communication. And I worked in science communication and outreach for about 5 years and then moved into teaching. So I was a secondary school teacher. But then I realized I don't really like working with children. So I went off and did a PhD, coming back to the molecular biology again. Straight out of the PhD, I did regulatory affairs, but that didn't suit. So I moved on to Almac. I worked in Almac as a technician in Almac Diagnostics for a while. And then I went off and did a postdoc in the University of Oxford. And I was there for about 6 or 7 years. And then came back in postdoc in Queen's before moving over to Exploristics. And the work in the postdoc was working with kind of high dimensional data. And when it comes to working with things like that, using kind of well-known statistical software like GraphPad, that just doesn't cut it anymore. So you need to move over into programming. And that's what enabled me to use it as a stepping stone into working in Exploristics, where we do quite a bit of programming as well.
Lovely. Thank you very much, Sheila, and thanks to the three of you for that introduction. So I can go back to each of you and then we'll do questions and perhaps just spend a couple of minutes outlining if each of you give your views on what the key skill is that you believe is important for students to be working on now outside of their technical in order to succeed in the graduate market within your organisations or industries. Francis, we can start with you. And do you want me to put those 2 wee slides up now? Is that useful?
Well, probably the answer to this question I can give without the slide.
Okay,
but then
great.
if you want to put up the slide, I can show the degree pathways. I mean, when thinking about this, it was hard to pick one skill, but the one that I would pick out would be communication. And what I mean by that is to succeed in the graduate market, or if you're applying for placements, it's about how you can articulate your skills and knowledge to an employer, so that they look at your CV or your application and it's a no-brainer for them to shortlist you and invite you to interview. So what you need to do is you need to think about the holistic view of your technical knowledge, your extracurricular experience as well, be it part-time jobs or volunteering, and look at a job description and be able to communicate how you meet the essential and desirable criteria on that job description. That is really, really important to be able to do that. And to do that, you need to understand the roles and understand what the company's about. And, again, bring across your passion for doing the job in the organization. So I think being able to communicate that clearly, both on paper as well as at interview, is really important. And to remember that you can do so much to prepare and come armed with the knowledge that equips you to answer the questions is something to bear in mind. So, I mean, maybe if you'd like to put up the 2 slides now, it might be easiest because I'm conscious of the time, and I'm going to put a timer on here so I don't go over on you, Claudine.
You're fine. Here we go. So this links into the next question, so we can actually just run 2 questions simultaneously.
Okay. So basically, in terms of career paths, I know this is a health science sort of a cluster meeting, but just to impress upon you, developing pharmaceuticals is a whole team effort involving people from lots of different disciplines. And this is a snapshot of the job families that we have at Almac. So whilst many of you listening today maybe within the scientific R&D, I've seen people bioinformatics, biological sciences, medical physics. There are equally so many jobs outside of the lab, within quality, within project management, within business development, regulatory affairs, as was mentioned there. But and as I said, I work in marketing, and I still use my STEM background, though my science background, to be able to explain the opportunities within Almac and explain what we do as an organisation. But just to maybe go on to the next slide then, which is to say that, I looked at the degrees available in Queen's. I mean, I know most of them anyway, but there's a whole list there, and that's not an exhaustive list of where you could be coming as a placement student or a graduate to us. Because this year we've 35 placement students at Almac, and they're not all from like chemistry, medicinal chemistry and biological sciences. There'll be ones from other disciplines as well. We'll have computer science and engineering students. We have graduates who have psychology degrees working within our project management team. We have people with engineering degrees working within quality or within project management or within manufacturing operations. And really what I would say to those who are the second years, or if you're in a master's with a year in industry, you can always look at your year in industry as an investment to try and find out what else is out there other than maybe the linear career path that you think you will take from your degree. Take a punt on something different. Take a punt on a quality role or a project management role. It's 12 months that you'll get paid for and expose you to maybe another career path that you might not have first of all considered if you were primarily within a scientific discipline and thinking about a linear sort of path into a laboratory role. So this is just, to impress upon you that, and I think it probably mirrors what Rob will have said, there are so many different opportunities, and it's that combination of, yes, your technical knowledge for many of these roles within project management, quality. A degree in a life sciences discipline is a desirable, it's not an essential. It's all about your other skills, your team working, your critical thinking and problem solving, your communication skills. So, these are just things for you to consider, and just to remember that really the pharma industry is broad and wide, and there are opportunities and very fulfilling and rewarding career paths across no matter what area you're in.
And really growing as well. Yeah, fantastic. Okay, so Jerry, over to you, if you don't mind touching on the skill piece and then maybe a little bit about the breadth and depth of roles.
Yeah, so what non-technical skills, I think if I were to pick one, I think it would have to be empathy. And I say that on two fronts. One is that every organization's changing. The old command and control and linear structure is changing, and successful organizations today are growing from the bottoms up, and really they compete by having a series of successful, diverse, multifunctional, multi-ethnic teams. And there's loads of evidence from Google and Microsoft data to support that. And if you're, as much as we talk about our differences, we live in a very homogenous society. And if you're going to function in a global virtual team, empathy is a very important thing, to be able to understand different point of views, to listen to them. And you mightn't agree with them, but to understand where they're coming from. So from a team's point of view. But the second reason why I think empathy is really important, many of you in your course, if you're doing innovation or productization, might have heard of design thinking. And at the core of design thinking, what starts first is empathy. You need to understand the need. And in Northern Ireland, the UK, one of our weaknesses, we have great research, but we don't turn that into products, right? And key to that is successful products, is understanding that need and having the empathy to see why society, what's the purpose for this product? And then also, how can it be viable? Because there's no point in coming up with a product that you can't afford to make and stuff. So I would say empathy. How do you get empathy? You get it, you're not born with it. You get it by putting yourself out of your comfort zone, engage and volunteer more, get involved in team sports. Obviously, take work experience, whatever work experience it is, but that you can get it. You learn it through your experience, but be aware that you need it, and be aware that you come from we all come here from a very homogenous background, much as we like to point to difference.
Lovely, thank you very much.
In terms of Seagate, then, Look, we traditionally have recruited from physics and chemistry, the traditional sciences. We have a doctoral training centre with Queen's that gives us a lot of our the physics department in particular, that gives a lot of our technical talent, engineering, electronics. Recently, as the workforce changes and IT 4.0 takes hold, new degrees like data analytics, AI, machine learning, virtual reality, they're all becoming really important. So we're increasingly looking to those skills. But the reality is, and I think everybody said it, no matter what job you are, it's going to change dramatically, even in a short space of time. Look at how a doctor's job has changed through COVID. And what I would say to people, if I think of what's the pressures on Seagate and what's changing the way we do things, but I think this applies to everybody. I think there's three things you should watch. The first one is digitalization, is the impact that these tools, the tools available are having to us now, both positive and negative, on the way we do our work. And COVID has accelerated a lot of them. The second one is decarbonisation. So, we're getting it all the time with COP26, but it is a real existential problem for business. And I think business and enterprise will be ahead of government, because 1 in 3 firms in the world lost working days last year due to a climate change event. So you're going to find, particularly those with deep pockets, the guys behind the data centers, coming up with solutions. And those solutions will probably come from business, but will also be regulated. But they're really going to radically change where we work, how we work, right? And the consequences of what we design, for example, power consumption and so on. And the last one is geopolitics. That's probably the reason I'm in the role I am. The world is changing. The old world order has broken down, and COVID has changed that. And regions, governments, they're looking at becoming more digitally sovereign, tech sovereign, and they're focusing on developing clusters and integrating SMEs and the whole system, what's called a triple or quadruple helix, integrating everything under one purpose, but they can't be every cluster. So what you're going to see in the 10X plan for Northern Ireland, you're going to see clusters develop around pharma, around life sciences, probably in Northern Ireland, fintech, green tech, advanced manufacturing. Maybe not all of them, because it might only be 2 or 3, but that's what's happening all over the world. So when you decide what area you get in or where you're going to go, watch out for the cluster that's growing. And that's not about FDIs, it's about the small startups like cybersecurity that are really making a difference, that are really growing. So they'd be my messages.
Wonderful, thank you very much. And over to you, Sheila, then. So we've got those 2 questions about the non-technical skills and then the organisation recruiting. Yep.
Cool. Non-technical skills, I guess, in thinking about this, it'd be an openness or willing to have a crack at anything in terms of learning things. If it's not outlined in your degree pathway, or if there's not an emphasis on something that you are interested in, to just go and develop those skill sets yourself, which kind of would tie in with the kind of degree pathways and that are brought on by exploristics. So exploristics, if you were to look at it, it says, the emphasis is on statistics. And if I had just looked at that, I would have run a mile, because I was scared of statistics and did not feel comfortable moving into that. But then when you look a bit further, you can see that, so for example, we have the people who have the maths and statistics and data analysis backgrounds, data science backgrounds, who do work on particularly on the services and statistical consulting side of things. But then we have the data strategy team, and we have marketing and business development and the software development team. And we come from a kind of eclectic bunch of people. We've got people from economics, we've got people from, we've got plenty of life sciences people. So myself with the molecular biology background, other people have ecology backgrounds, people have medical backgrounds and so on. But what they have in common is that somewhere along the line, they've had a crack at doing something in terms of software development or programming, if even just an attempt, even if it was a failed attempt. So when it comes to the likes of, and Frances had chatted about this earlier, where she was saying thinking in terms of how you communicate what you can achieve in terms of job description and so on for anything you're applying for, what we would be looking for is somebody who had taken a project from the start, where they might have had a lot of raw data right through to the end, where they have maybe presented it in one form or another, whether that's a report, a poster, a paper, or even just a chat with a stakeholder. But it's all of those skill sets, and this is why I'm saying an openness to showing from getting there from the raw data right through to the completed project. And the reason why I bring that up is because there might not be opportunity for people to get a crack at programming in their actual master's projects or their undergraduate projects or something like that. But it was just to point out there is tons of open data on the internet, and it could align with the work that they're interested in doing in terms of, you know, if they're looking at a particular disease area or so on. There are loads of open access databases, but there's also loads and loads of tutorials and work packages and things to do like this with programming that they could say, right, I want to generate an outcome from this. And if you did that and you attempted that and you could talk about that, that's the kind of person that our company recruits. Even if it wasn't in a formalized work setting or academic setting, if it was something they had tried for themselves, we're very much interested in, because that shows a huge breadth of skills being able to do something like that.
I'll meet again on and off. Brilliant. Thank you for giving those kind of insights, and for our students, just to note that Jerry mentioned the 10x economy, so the economic vision for, you know, our decade of innovation. And my colleague Carl has actually just posted the headline kind of information from that into the chat, so it's useful for you guys to have a read and have a think about moving forward. Guys, I just want to move on to a next question, and we've kind of touched on this a little bit already, but, you know, perhaps to look back, and, you know, these guys are about to go out and get that first job and that first move. Most are undergraduates, although some will be PhDs. You know, is there any advice you would perhaps give to your student self, you know, when you remember back to that point, to that undergrad point, that they can start to kind of think about now, understanding that the world has changed and is different, but any thoughts? I wouldn't mind starting with you again, Frances, if that's okay.
Yeah, I was thinking about this, and I mean, the one thing that I think I would certainly say, this is my experience and it's all worked out great. I suppose I didn't do a lot of research into my options to sort of explore what the scope of the different, you know, kind of opportunities I could go to as a, you know, as a graduate, and even then after my PhD. I tended to sort of follow a very linear path and take the opportunities as they came to me, instead of maybe me doing my research and going after opportunities. So my advice to my younger self would have been just to be more informed about what my options were. And, you know, in order to do that, I would be like attending events like these, so I'm speaking to the converted here, but also, you know, researching companies and, you know, looking at sort of the trends within the industry and things like that, to just sort of build a picture in my mind of, you know, well, my plan A might be this, but what would my plan B, C, and D be? And maybe not to be so concerned. I was really just by my nature concerned about job security, you know, that I knew exactly it had, you know, I wanted a permanent position over a contract and that type of thing. And I would say, you know, my advice to myself would have been actually go with what really inspires you and what's putting you have a direction of travel. You might not know your end destination yet, but that keeps you moving forward, and not to be afraid to take a 12-month contract, because you know what, that could lead to a permanent job or lead to another opportunity. So just really follow your passion, but be informed about how you go about doing that.
Wonderful, thank you. I think that links back to what Rob said as well, around, you know, do what interests you, and that can lead in a variety of different ways. So Jerry, over to you.
Yeah, so long ago I can hardly remember. I think in 1980, when I went to university, it was a very individualistic world. Okay, you studied on your own, you did your projects on your own, you built your own career, you went into sort of very traditional hierarchy. And I think I was learning things an awful lot that I didn't realize how important they were. In reality, you know, enterprise success is a team sport. And I probably didn't know it at the time. But even things like I was captain of a university soccer team, I probably learned an awful lot through that. But most of all, I'd say the thing that I have the same set of 12 friends who actually meet every year for a weekend. We're meeting next year from university. So that's 40 years on, and very few of them are engineers, by the way. That's probably why they're my friends. But the importance of keeping good company, right? And I'm not just talking people. I'm talking about books. I'm talking about the programs you watch. I'm talking about doing a bit of volunteer and just engaging with society. Okay, that good company. You know, graduates today, they have so much going for them. Okay, you have so much opportunity, but you need the people around you to keep you calibrated. You need them there to support you, and you need them to be honest with you, because you need the confidence to take the risks, and you know, the support to pick you up if they do fail. So I would say keep good company. As probably, I was very blessed with the company I had, and I think that sort of stuck with me all my life. So keep good company would be the advice I
That's
give.
lovely piece of advice, and I think hopefully like a good little phrase to remember, and it links into that piece that your job isn't just a function of something you do 9 to 5, and it's about your whole holistic self, isn't it?
Yeah.
So Sheila, then over to you.
So I was trying to think of a way to phrase this, and what I have is be cheeky, but what I mean is reaching out to people that you might not thought of that you would. So for example, if you see a company that you would like to work for, as Francis had advised, do your research and see who the key people might be and drop them an email. It's only an email. They might totally ignore it and never look near it, and you'll never hear from them again. But you never know, they might. You only need to get lucky once for them to kind of say, oh, that's interesting. And they might give you some advice back in terms of, well, we don't have opportunities right now, but look out for such and such an opportunity coming up, and so on. Another way to be, not be cheeky, but when you've done a job interview and perhaps you weren't successful, you can go back to them and ask them for feedback. And I know that that's obvious, but there, in the past, I had gone and asked for feedback. So for example, when I applied for position working as postdoc in Oxford, I had said, well, I didn't get that position, but I think your group is really, really interested in doing fabulous work, and I would love to work for you. And they said, well, we would strongly encourage you to apply for the next one. And I did, and I got that. And another thing too about being cheeky was I would never have thought to apply for Oxford, except that my partner was working over there and I needed a job. And then when you get over there, you find that actually there's a weird situation where places like Oxford and Cambridge don't have people applying for the jobs. It came up again and again, like in technical positions and so on. It was almost like people thought, well, sure, I'm not going to, maybe it would be too tough to get in there. And they found that they would only have a small number of people for the jobs they had put out. So just be really cheeky and brazen. Even if you don't feel like it, force yourself to, and you never know.
Thank you. Yeah, no, it's good advice, because you don't necessarily think that at the time. Guys, loads of golden nuggets there, I suppose. Lots of similar threads, and certainly for me, what I'll take away is that idea of being passionate, having empathy, being brave, keep good company. And I suppose, for the students who are all, fantastically working away at their technical skills, which is, the springboard, and it's amazing, but try and also think about those in a broader way. Guys, just to let you know that Almac, Seagate and Exploristics all have live vacancies for you at the moment. They're all up on my Future. And the only other thing I would say is, as our speakers have been saying, is, widen things out a bit. Do take advantage of the work shadowing, of the internships, of the placements, and get some of that experience to see how it works for you moving forward. So Francis, Jerry and Sheila, thanks very much for taking time out of the business, your busy diaries, and we do know you are very busy. Great nuggets there. I think that we can reframe, and guys, we're going to record this and put it up on the Industry Insights area on careers, so you can watch it back, and there'll be some really great learning for you moving forward. Final thing to say is there's an Industry Insight session, guys, probably not necessarily applicable to most of this audience, but it's next Tuesday at 12 o'clock. You can register for it in my Future, and it's looking at legal careers. So brilliant. Francis, Jerry, Sheila and group, thank you very much for your time.
Cheers. Thank you.
Can I just say, just for those
Yeah.
that are there, if you're interested, if you go onto the careers website, we have a virtual work experience hub. Now, I know it's mostly targeted towards post-primary, but there are day in the life videos there, many QUB graduates amongst them, and it'll give you just a snapshot of what their role involves. It's really important that when you're looking at jobs that you kind of have a feel, and not the job description doesn't always, it's a very dry way of trying to bring across a job. So it's just to say that to those who are listening, as well as just joining the talent network. If we will be advertising more placements, but if you want to be notified and you join the talent network, we'll send you an email alert as well. So I'm sure Sheila and Jerry may have similar things. I'm sorry, I don't mean to grab the mic there, but it was just to let those know, it might be some useful information.
Yeah, no, that's a really useful point, because you guys do have jobs up on our obviously in our system,
yeah.
So we can look at that. But do also check organisations' websites, and they'll have more resources there around recruitment. So that's a really valuable thing to do as well. Great.
And the ABPI, Association for British Pharmaceutical Industry, is also another good resource for careers information pertaining to the pharma industry.
I'll just put it through in the chat. Association for.
So I'll put it in the ABPI. Okay, so I'll get the website here just so that I'll put it in. I think it's probably www.abpi. If I can type, I'll just check it out here and I'll put it in the chat very quickly. Thanks very much.
Lovely. Okay. So all the best, guys. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.